They tried to hide it. Every step, every glance, every second was meant to look normal, controlled, or invisible. But something didn't add up. Not to the fans. Not to the people who notice everything. It started with a simple moment. 2 separate appearances, nothing unusual on the surface. Different places. Different times. Or at least, that's what we were supposed to believe. But then came the detail. The one tiny clue that refused to stay hidden. The kind of detail you miss if you blink, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. The timing didn't match. The outfits felt too aligned. The energy, too familiar. And suddenly, what looked random started forming a pattern. A connection. Something deeper than coincidence. Fans began digging. Slowing down clips. Zooming in. Comparing everything frame by frame. And what they found? It's shaking the entire community right now. Because if this is true, then this wasn't accidental. This wasn't random. This was something carefully kept out of sight. So the real question is, what were they trying so hard to hide? And why does this one detail change everything? Stay with me, because what you're about to see next might completely shift how you see this story. It didn't explode all at once. It spread quietly, like a whisper that refused to die. At first, it was just one clip. A slowed-down frame pulled from a crowded airport scene. 2 figures moving side by side, faces hidden, steps perfectly in sync. Nothing unusual, until someone noticed the smallest inconsistency. The angle of a hand. The way one of them adjusted something at the exact same moment the other did, almost like a mirrored instinct rather than coincidence. Then came the second piece. A completely different setting. Open sky, distant mountains, a moment that was supposed to feel separate, detached from everything else. But the details followed them. The same rhythm. The same unspoken coordination. And then that one element, subtle, nearly invisible, but identical in both moments. Not similar. Not close. Identical. That's when everything changed. Because once the connection was made, it couldn't be undone. People began stitching timelines together. Not casually, but obsessively. Seconds were compared, shadows analyzed, movements dissected down to fractions. What once looked like 2 unrelated appearances started aligning with unsettling precision. The gaps between them shrank. The distance felt artificial. And suddenly, the question wasn't whether they were connected, but how long it had been happening right in front of everyone. And the more they looked, the deeper it went. There were patterns no one noticed before. Repeated habits. Shared details that didn't make sense unless you assumed something was deliberately being kept out of sight. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was controlled. Almost too controlled. That's what made it feel real. Because randomness is messy. Coincidences don't line up this clean. Something about this did. And yet, there was silence. No confirmation. No denial. Just that heavy, deliberate absence of explanation that only made everything louder. Because when nothing is said, people start listening harder, watching closer, connecting dots that were never meant to be connected. And then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. A frame most people would scroll past without thinking. Barely a second long. But in that second, something slipped. Not enough to be obvious. Not enough to be undeniable. But enough to feel different. Enough to make people stop. Because for the first time, it didn't feel hidden. It felt like a crack. And once a crack appears, it doesn't stay small for long. Now the conversation has shifted. It's no longer about guessing. It's about interpreting. Deciding what all of this means, and whether it was ever meant to stay invisible in the first place. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the more you look, the more you realize this might not be about one moment, or one detail, or even one connection. It might be something that's been unfolding quietly over time, layered so carefully that no single piece gives it away, until you step back and see the whole picture. And when you finally do, it doesn't feel accidental anymore. It feels intentional. So now you're left with something heavier than curiosity. If this was never supposed to be seen, then why does it feel like it was almost revealed on purpose? And if that's true, then what comes next isn't just another clue. It's something they might not be able to hide at all. The shift didn't feel accidental anymore. It felt staged on the edge of exposure, like something carefully controlled had started slipping beyond control. What made it worse wasn't just the detail itself, but the reaction that followed. Movements became tighter. Appearances grew more calculated. The space between moments felt forced, like distance was being created where it didn't naturally exist. And that only made people look closer. Because when something is real, it doesn't need correction. But this started to look like correction. The timeline that once barely connected was now impossible to ignore. Every new appearance carried echoes of the last. Familiar patterns kept resurfacing, subtle but undeniable.